There is a particular kind of ambition that the entertainment industry does not know how to handle. Not the ambition to be more famous, or better paid, or more powerful within the existing hierarchy, but the ambition to change what the hierarchy is. To look at the system that has cast you in a specific role and decide, with the clarity of someone who has examined the system carefully and found it insufficient, that the role is not the limit and that the system is not the ceiling. This kind of ambition makes people uncomfortable. It makes studios nervous. It makes the people who benefit from the existing arrangement defensive. And it produces, occasionally, when the person who possesses it is also talented enough and stubborn enough and brave enough to act on it, something that changes the art form permanently. Ida Lupino changed the art form permanently. Hollywood has not entirely forgiven her for it, which is how you know she succeeded. Ida Lupino was born on February 4th, 1918, in Camberwell, London, into a family so thoroughly theatrical that the stage was less a career option than a birthright. Her father, Stanley Lupino, was a celebrated comedian and stage performer. Her mother was an actress. The family tree on both sides contained performers going back generations. The Lupinos were, by some accounts, one of the oldest theatrical families in England, with roots in the commedia dell'arte tradition that stretched back centuries. She grew up backstage, in dressing rooms and rehearsal halls, and the wings of theaters, absorbing the craft the way children absorb whatever surrounds them, completely, without effort, as if the knowledge were simply in the air. She arrived in Hollywood in 1933, at 15 years old, and was immediately cast as a blonde ingénue in a series of films that used her face and her English accent and her obvious screen presence without requiring very much else of her. She was decorative in these early films, in the way that young actresses are decorative when the industry has not yet decided what to do with them. Present, luminous, and somewhat beside the point. She endured it with the patience of someone who understands that the present situation is not the permanent one, and who is paying attention to everything around her because the education is available if you are willing to take it. Warner Brothers signed her, and the better roles began to arrive. They Without Souls, in 1940, High Sierra in 1941, alongside Humphrey Bogart, in which she played a role of genuine complexity and brought to it a rawness and an emotional directness that the studio had not expected, and that audiences responded to with the recognition of people seeing something true. The Hard Way in 1943 won her the New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Actress. She was, by the mid-1940s, one of the most respected dramatic actresses in Hollywood. Not the most famous, not the most glamorous, but the one that serious directors wanted when the material was serious. Then came the suspension. She refused a role she found beneath her abilities, and Warner Brothers, which did not enjoy being refused, suspended her, which in the studio system meant no salary, no work, and no ability to work elsewhere. The studio expected her to sit at home and reconsider. She did not sit at home. She went to the sets of other directors and watched. Not as a visitor, not as a famous actress dropping in on a production. As a student, sitting behind the camera, observing the technical process, with the focused attention of someone who has decided to learn something and is not going to be distracted from the learning. She talked to cinematographers. She studied the relationship between the camera and the human face from the other side of the lens. She asked questions and listened to the answers, and stored everything with the thoroughness of someone building toward a specific destination. She co-founded Emerald Productions, later called The Filmmakers, with her then-husband, Collier Young, and she began directing. The films she made were not the films Hollywood was making, not the studio spectacles with their controlled environments and their carefully managed emotional content. She shot on location, on real streets, in real buildings, with the raw, immediate quality that actual places give to a film that constructed sets cannot replicate. She worked with small budgets that forced creative solutions and that produced, as small budgets sometimes do, a visual honesty that larger productions can purchase away. Not Wanted in 1949 was her first directorial credit, a film about an unwed mother, made at a time when the subject was so socially charged that the studio system would not touch it. Outrage in 1950 addressed sexual assault with a directness and a seriousness that Hollywood's self-censorship apparatus had made effectively impossible for major studio productions. Never Fear in 1949 dealt with polio, a disease that was at the height of its epidemic impact on American life, and that popular entertainment largely avoided because audiences were assumed to want escape rather than confrontation. Lupino confronted. Her instinct, consistent across every film she directed, was toward the subject that made people uncomfortable, the story that the mainstream would not tell. The person, usually a woman, usually without power, usually without the resources that Hollywood's preferred protagonists took for granted, whose experience the screen had not yet given language. Her crews called her Mother. The nickname was affectionate and it was accurate. She ran her sets with a warmth and a practicality that the directorial machismo of the era had not prepared anyone to encounter. She was collaborative in a way that the auteur tradition finds difficult to account for, because the auteur tradition tends to confuse collaboration with weakness and control with strength, and Lupino understood that the best films are made when the people making them feel valued rather than commanded. She got the best from her casts and crews because she gave the best of herself and expected, not demanded, expected, the same in return. The television work that followed her film directing career was extensive and undervalued, in the way that television work was always undervalued in an industry that considered the small screen beneath its dignity. She directed episodes of Have Gun Will Travel and The Twilight Zone, and dozens of other series, with the same professionalism and the same creative intelligence she had brought to her films, bringing a visual sophistication and an emotional seriousness to material that the industry treated as disposable and that she refused to treat as anything other than worthy of her full attention. She continued acting alongside the directing, playing roles in other directors' films with a generosity of spirit that her own ambitions might have made difficult to sustain, but that she maintained because she understood that the craft did not belong to any single function within it. She was an actress who directed and a director who acted, and the two things fed each other in ways that neither alone could have produced. She died on August 3, 1995, in Burbank, California, at the age of 77. She had lived long enough to see the independent cinema she had helped pioneer become. In the 1980s and 1990s, one of the dominant creative forces in American film, to see the low-budget, location-shot, socially engaged filmmaking she had practiced in the 1950s become the prestigious mode rather than the marginal one. She had lived long enough to be recognized, belatedly, as a pioneer, though the recognition came late enough and incompletely enough to suggest that the industry had not entirely made its peace with what she had done and what it implied about what women were capable of. She broke the glass ceiling with a megaphone in one hand and a cigarette in the other, as the man said. What she left behind is not a ceiling at all. It is a door, and it is open. And every woman who has walked through it since has walked through it, partly because Ida Lupino went first. She always went first. That was the whole point.